The definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting different results. Basically, that is what has happened with Penn State football. Going into pretty much every college football season over the last probably 8 to 9 years, many believed that Penn State would finally turn the corner. Despite a track record of consistent underperformance and crucial game management mistakes, every year people think that James Franklin is miraculously going to change, the Penn State culture is going to change, and they're going to all of a sudden figure out how to win those big games. Interestingly enough, I ended up buying the snake oil this past offseason. I really did think that Penn State could win the Big Ten East. I bought all the Drew Aller hype, I bought the James Franklin hype, and overall, I bought the Penn State National Championship hype. As we are now over halfway through the season, it looks like Penn State football is basically the same exact team. A team that's underperforming, a team that at times shows flashes of greatness, and the team that just cannot beat the big teams. While we don't have a huge sample size, Penn State got soundly beat by Ohio State, struggled with a very inferior Indiana team this past weekend, and just overall has not progressed. In today's video, I want to talk about Penn State football. I want to talk about why they're pretty much the same team every year, why they can't seem to get over the hump, and how I think the rest of the season could finish for them. But before we get started, quickly be sure to leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love college football content, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Penn State football. So going back in time, a decade ago, the Penn State scandal rocked both the entire college football world and the whole world in general, and Penn State was left scrambling to try to fix the program. The Lions had been one of the most prestigious programs in all of college football over the last 50 years or so, and when it was time to find a new head ball coach, they went out and got Bill O'Brien. In year 1 in 2012, he led them to an 8-4 record with a 6-2 mark in the conference, and then in 2013, he once again led them back to a bowl game. He went 15-9 in 2 years, and eventually bolted for the NFL. Bill O'Brien had successfully stabilized the Penn State program, and had used them as a stepping stone to a big-time NFL job. Now in order for Penn State to continue to be successful, they would have to nail their next hire, and hopefully keep them around longer than 2 years. Who did they go out and get? Well, they got one of the best coaches in the country as they hired James Franklin away from Vanderbilt. To some, the hire wasn't that great, but the fact that Franklin won a decent amount of games at Vanderbilt says a lot. The Commodores have not had a lot of winning seasons, and Franklin had them competitive in the SEC. He was known for developing talent, getting the most out of his team, and many thought that would translate to Penn State, where they could pour in more resources, give him a bigger stage, and the ability to land better recruits and more talented players. When Franklin arrived at Happy Valley, at first he did just that. So since Franklin took over, here are his records. In 2014, he went 7-6 with a 2-6 mark in the East. They ended up making a bowl game, and pretty much the same thing would happen the following year, as they also went 7-6. In 2015, they went 11-3, lost in the Rose Bowl, won the Big Ten Championship, and had that famous win over Ohio State. In 2017, they backed it up once again, as they went 11-2. Franklin from here became pretty consistent. In 2018, he went 9-4, and that was pretty good for a down year. And then in 2019, they went 11-2 after starting out 8-0. The one thing that you will notice so far is while Penn State has been near the top, they always have 2 or 3 losses a year. Continuing on though, in the weird 2020 season, the team went 4-5, including an 0-5 start. And then in 2021, despite starting off highly ranked, they ended up going 7-6. Franklin was on the hot seat going into 2022, and last year they won the Rose Bowl with an 11-2 record. We're going to dive deeper into some of those seasons in just a moment, but one of the first things you'll notice is that Franklin has never won 12 games. He's a good coach, but not an elite coach. And at a school with the tradition like Penn State, I don't know how much longer he is going to last. But I think the best indicator as to whether James Franklin has the same style of team every year is to take a look at where the team started out ranked week 1 compared to where they were ranked for their bowl game. That'll show his general trend there. In 2014, the team started out unranked and finished the year unranked. It was the same story in 2015 as they lost at home to a good Temple team in week 1 and then finished the year unranked with a bowl win. Going into 2016, things get interesting. This is when Franklin's Lions finally broke out, as they started the year outside the polls, but were ranked number 5 for their Rose Bowl matchup with USC. They ended up losing, but that was Franklin's breakout year, and where things are really going to start to get a little bit fascinating here. Going into 2017, Penn State started the year ranked number 6, climbed as high as number 2, and then ended up ranked number 9 for their game against Washington. In that year, Franklin actually lived up to the hype. In 2018, Penn State started out ranked number 10, and going into their bowl game against Kentucky, ended up number 12. Once again, he was consistent. In 2019, they were preseason ranked 15th, and ended up ranked number 10 in their bowl game against Memphis. They climbed as high as number 4, and in 2019, the Nittany Lions actually overachieved. 2020 was rough. In the preseason, they were ranked number 8 and finished the year unranked while starting out the year 0-5. Obviously, he was horrible. 2021, things weren't much better. They started the year ranked number 19, climbed as high as number 4, and then ended up finishing unranked. Despite a 5-0 start, they lost 6 of their last 8 games, and this was embarrassing and put Franklin on the hot seat. In 2022, Franklin did the opposite. The Nittany Lions were not ranked for their matchup against Purdue and finished the year at number 11 with a Rose Bowl victory over Utah. So all in all, Franklin actually has been remarkably consistent, and I think a lot of this is recency bias. Penn State's pretty much finished the year the same place they started, meaning he's living up to expectations. Besides those 2 terrible years in 2020 and 2021, for the most part, he has actually overachieved. So that now settles that. Franklin is a consistent coach and lives up to the preseason expectation. But how has Franklin done against the Big Two and Ohio State and Michigan? Those are the most important 2 games to Nittany Lions fans, and are the general reason why Penn State feels like they're the same program each and every year. Let's take a look at these now. Okay, so in 2014, they went on the road and lost to Michigan, and lost in double overtime at home to Ohio State. So far, 0-2. In 2015, they lost to Ohio State and lost to Michigan. Once again, they did the same exact thing. In 2016, they lost on the road to number 4 Michigan, and this time beat number 2 Ohio State at home by way of that blocked field goal. So far, he's 1-5 against those 2. In 2017, this time they beat Michigan and lost by 1 to Ohio State on the road. That game was also insane. In 2018, they once again lost the Ohio State game by 1 point, had that awful 4th down call, and then got blown out on the road by Michigan. So far in 5 years, Franklin was 2-8 against those teams. In 2019, they lost on the road to Ohio State and beat number 16 Michigan at home. That was solid. In 2020, they lost to Ohio State and beat Michigan. In 2021, they lost to Michigan and lost to Ohio State. In 2022, their only 2 losses were to Ohio State and Michigan. Also, another fun fact is that Franklin has lost to Michigan State 6 times. The Spartans have been pretty consistent, and what does this tell me? Well, the reason why Penn State feels like the same exact team every single year is because they pretty much are. They live up to expectation, they win a good amount of games, and lose to pretty much the same teams every year. While some of those Ohio State games were close, Franklin has always found a way to butcher them, and the Michigan series has not been much better. So in review so far, Franklin's had a couple of decent seasons, pretty much always lives up to the preseason hype, and loses to the same teams every year. That has been the story of the James Franklin era, so where does this year's team fit in? Well, let's take a look. Going into this year, Penn State had national title hopes. In the class of 2022, they brought in a 5-star quarterback by the name of Drew Allar, a 5-star running back by the name of Nick Singleton, and a lot of talented players on defense. For the most part, all those players either showed an immense amount of flash or ended up being better earlier on than expected. Because of that, Penn State had extremely sky-high expectations going into this year. Many thought that Drew Allar was going to potentially be a top 5 quarterback in all of college football, but right now he's looking a lot more like Christian Hackenberg than a top 5 player. In terms of the running back spot, for the most part, they have lived up to the hype, as both Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen have been great, and Penn State's pretty much leaned on their ground game the whole time. The defense has also been tremendous this year, and going into the Indiana game, they'd only given up 1 play of 40+ yards. Okay, so Penn State has been solid, but how has the year gone? Well, in week 1, they blew out West Virginia. In week 2, they blew out Delaware. In week 3, they blew out Illinois. In week 4, they shut out Iowa. In week 5, they beat Northwestern. In week 6, they shut out Massachusetts. And then their past 2 games have brought them back down to reality. They beat up on either bad teams and took care of your average Power 5 programs. But once they had their first taste of big competition, they once again floundered. Against Ohio State, Drew Allar disappeared. The running game really couldn't get going, and Ohio State comfortably won that game. Despite all the hype, Penn State once again floundered. How would they respond? Well, they almost laid an egg against Indiana. Going into this game, you could argue that IU football was one of the worst Power 5 programs in the nation. They went into Penn State, scored 2 early huge touchdowns, and hung with the Nittany Lions all the way to the end. They even tied the game up 24-24, and Penn State ended up winning because of one nice pass from Allar, and then a fumble safety by Brendan Sorsby on Indiana. Right now, Penn State's 7-1, and their final 4 games will come against Maryland, Michigan, Rutgers, and Michigan State. A few weeks ago, I was intrigued by that Maryland game, but that has completely fallen apart, and the Terrapins are no good. They host Rutgers on November 18th, and while Rutgers has a good record, they don't have the offense to compete in this game. This is the worst Michigan State season in a long time, so they should easily win that game. The one game that everyone has circled is their home matchup against number 2 Michigan. This was one of those 3 games of the year in the Big Ten East, and luckily Penn State gets Michigan at home. Right now, the Wolverines haven't really played anybody, but their offense is looking great. They are loaded with NFL talent, and they are just executing. If the same Penn State team we've seen the last 2 weeks comes out playing like this against Michigan, then they are going to lose their second game. In the offseason, I had Penn State winning, but I'm going to flip that to Michigan, and I have Penn State finishing at 10-2. So to wrap things up, Penn State really is the same team every year. They get a lot of preseason hype, have a couple of good players, win some games, but can't beat top competition. So far in James Franklin's tenure, the Nittany Lions are 12-24 against ranked teams. They've been even worse against both Michigan and Ohio State, and have even struggled beating Michigan State. For the most part, they're going to win their non-conference games, are going to beat up against the bottom of the Big Ten, beat the teams they should, and lose to the teams that they're supposed to lose to. It really is as simple as that, and 2023 is playing out the exact same way. Alvar is not living up to the hype, the running game is doing its job, the defense is doing its job, Franklin's losing to top 25 teams, and they're likely to go 10-2. I don't know if Penn State will truly ever get over the hump, but eventually, Franklin may be fired if he can't get it together. The Nittany Lions expect great success, and he's just not giving it to them. It's sad that Penn State's once again the same team, but there's nothing new under the sun, and I feel bad for Penn State fans because this truly is the definition of insanity. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, be sure to leave a like. Let me know what player, topic, team, or situation I should cover next, and check out my video about how Elijah Drinkwitz rebuilt Mizzou football. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.